Welcome back to the report. In recent weeks, the Western media has become increasingly focused on the ongoing Ebola outbreak in Western Africa, as individual cases have appeared in the United States and Spain. In Sierra Leone, however, the Ebola crisis, with it has just killed nearly 1,000 people, is now having a knock-on effect on the country's peacekeeping operations, with a battalion of 800 troops who were due to be sent to Somalia having to be quarantined after their medical officer tested positive for the virus. Nathaniel Amos Sansom has more.
The Ebola outbreak in West Africa is increasingly being seen as a threat to the West. But in Sierra Leone, the news that a medical officer for a military battalion has tested positive for the virus shows that the indirect consequences of the virus could be just as damaging towards security. The 800-strong force, which was due to begin peacekeeping operations in Somalia, is now subject to a 21-day quarantine. The battalion was due to relieve the country's contingent, already participating in the African Union mission in Somalia, known as AMISOM, where they have been assisting government forces in their ongoing civil war with the forces of Al-Shabaab. In recent months, joint forces recaptured the coastal town of Barawai, a stronghold used by rebels to ship in guns and exchange raw materials for financing. The Amazon forces have achieved steady success in recent months in the country's ongoing conflict, but there are now concerns that the Ebola outbreak could have a serious effect on the mission's ability to combat Al-Shabaab. Since March, Ebola has killed over 4,000 people, mainly in the West African countries of Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea. In Sierra Leone last week, which has seen almost 1,000 deaths from the disease, the country's burial teams went on strike over non-payment of their weekly risk allowances. The bodies of those killed by Ebola are still contagious, and while the teams all wear protective clothing, many workers have become infected in this way.
From May to now, we have received up to, over 60 deaths of health workers in Sierra Leone. I think that one is very serious. It's really discouraging, and more has to be done if we are to reduce the number. But I will tell you for free, the number is still in increase.
And in the West, there is growing concern about the speed and growth of the virus, with many organizations critical of the slow response by national and international organizations. Speaking to the UN Security Council, the head of its Ebola response mission said the world risks losing the battle against the Ebola virus, which has so far defeated all efforts to contain it.
With each passing day, as more people are infected, as the number of people infected grows exponentially, the absolute value of these targets grows rapidly, and those targets become more distant and more difficult to achieve. If we do not reach these targets within 60 days, and the numbers spike, many more people will die.
President Obama echoed these concerns over the growing outbreak, as he told a meeting of defense chiefs from around the world yesterday that the international community was not doing enough to address the threat of Ebola.
The world as a whole is not doing enough. There are a number of countries that have capacity that have not yet stepped up. Those that have stepped up, all of us are going to have to do more because unless we contain this at the source, this is going to continue to pose a threat to individual countries at a time when there's no place that's more than a couple of air flights away.
Nathaniel Amos Sansom, The Report.
Well, joining me to discuss this are Duale Yusuf, Foreign Secretary of the Somalia Unity Council, and Ayo Johnson, freelance journalist who specialises in Africa. Welcome to the programme, both of you. Duale, before we move on to the effect of Ebola, the situation in Somalia, the taking of that port, does that mean that the African Union forces are making progress or not?
I think Somalia still is in trouble as it was before. Nothing has been changed. When you look, people are thinking about capturing the cities from Al-Shabaab, but if you look, the human crisis in Somalia is incredible. The government of Somalia has failed to protect the safety and security of Somalis, wherever they are, even those areas. The reality is, the world is not listening to us as a Somalian, and the people and the world already has called the Somali government a weak government. This government does not protect whatsoever it is, the life of Somali people, and we're fed up, honestly, as a diaspora, as a indigenous Somali people, that the government are not representing Somalia. Why we want 24,000 troops are operating, even they cannot stop the last Saturday's bombing in Mogadishu, which killed 11 people and 18 others injured. I mean, why these troops we want to, they come in Somalia and doing nothing? And they're not protecting the Somali people. They're not protecting even this weak government in Mogadishu. Hassan Sheikh and his government and the parliament, they all failed. You know, it is shame for us as a Somalian that somebody comes and defend our country, whoever it is, we can defend our country. What is shame is, I mean, this is not working unless Somalis allow it to come together and do something for their country.
Okay. Ayo, let's look at the interface between the Ebola crisis and this. Now, those 800 troops who were going to be deployed aren't able to be deployed because their medical officer was found to have the virus. Could this have further effects than this on the deployment of troops?
Absolutely. The Ebola crisis is ravaging across West Africa right now, and a country like Sierra Leone heavily affected and desperately needs assistance and support. And of course, the 800 that are part of this battalion, of which have been quarantined as we speak because of an individual who's been found out to have the virus, only sends the signals that it's available, it's possible that anyone can get this virus. And of course, with the military being so dependent and supporting the Somali effort, at least on the ground, in terms of resolving the ongoing conflict, as has just been expressed, becomes that much more difficult and desperate for the forces there. I think the contingency would have to be looking at itself. It's a 21-day sit-down by which they would be out of action. This would affect the conditions on the ground and the actions they were meant to be doing in Somalia. But I believe that the African Union would send other troops, or at least the existing battalion on the ground would have to stay that much longer, because these troops were meant to replace them.
I think I disagree with that. I mean, foreign troops and African Union hasn't done anything in Somalia except coming and getting work like other workers, like other immigrant workers. They haven't changed the life, the Somali crisis. For example, the Somali children don't go to school. There's no peace and security. Every day there are more than 24,000 troops called African Union. They cannot protect even the government compound, you know. There's every month, every other week says few civilians, civilians are dying, even the police of Somalia are dying. Where are these troops? Where are they? Who are they protecting? And why do we need more to add, you know, we had enough more troops in Somalia now. What we're saying today is if international want or African Union want to help Somalia, we should build our own troops, Somali troops.
One of the few things perhaps imaginable that might make the crisis in Somalia worse is if troops start bringing in the Ebola virus. Now, all right, this one was stopped, but there's no saying that it might not be caught in time next time.
Well, yes, the Somali issue is a desperate one, which requires troops and support for the existing weak government, which has been unable to stop the Al-Shabaab movement. And of course, as you rightfully said, if they get compounded on top of the problems they already have, the Ebola issue, then of course, who's to say whether Somalia has the infrastructure, which has been seen across West Africa to be very weak, if they have the capacity to stop a virus of this nature. And of course, this would only add pressure on the government, who's already facing untold pressure with Al-Shabaab and having to protect its own citizens against a force like that. So it would be very difficult for them.
Now, on the spread of the virus itself, just to move the conversation on a little bit, I mean, those are pretty stark warnings that we've heard at the UN and other places. Are there any points of light here? I mean, for instance, we've heard that perhaps Nigeria has managed to now contain it. Is that right?
Well, yes. Nigeria has shown that if you apply the right formula, which is very much about containing, tracing back all those who've been in touch or who've been in contact with those who had the virus, making sure you have good systems in place, you can defeat it. And success to them. And many congratulations to Goodluck Jonathan and his administration and the medical teams who've been able to achieve that. Over 40 days have gone by without a single Ebola case. That's amazing. And of course, you can see how the United States are struggling right now with a second case as that's running through. And of course, because there's over nearly 100 people who've already been quarantined just to try and contain that. So I think Nigeria's done well, but it remains to be seen whether other countries, which is why we're having the problems in Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea, who have weak infrastructure, who have not been able to trace back completely and fully those who've been come into contact with those who already have the disease, to be able to contain this problem. And that's the problem, tracing back.
So if the crisis, I mean, Ebola is one of the deadly disease, I mean, that even many Europeans now are scared of it, how these troops, I mean, the troops who was already infected, if they send to Somalia, they sentence the Somali people to death. And this is what we want to tell to the Sierra Leone government, you know, to avoid to sending these troops to Somalia. And as a Somalian, we don't want any more troops to come to Somalia. Really,
because you've already said that the central government is weak and therefore it will liable to fall into the category that Ayo says are governments that haven't been able to have the infrastructure to deal with this.
That's correct. You know, Somalia has the worst health facilities, and I mean, there's many other diseases that Somalian people are struggling. I'm bringing Ebola now. It's a death sentence. I mean, it will kill not thousands, but I believe hundreds of thousands. What we want to tell to the African Union, they should respect us. I mean, we know the Somali government as zipped. They cannot speak on behalf of us. But as the citizens of Somalia, we say the African Union, the African people, the African leaders, we had enough, you know. 24,000 troops, nothing has been done in Somalia so far. So we had enough is enough. What we want to, if African Union want to help the Somalian, they have to train Somali soldiers and give a chance for Somali people. Solution is the only in the Somali people.
Okay, Duale Yusuf, Ayo Johnson, thanks for your views. As former British Prime Minister...